Okay, welcome to our EMT course. This is the Fundamentals Unit, Lesson 1 on Safety and Lifting and Moving. The overview of this lesson is that it's going to be about 2 hours total. We have about an hour of online independent preparation, including this short screencast, and then an assignment with a resource document to work through. And then that's followed up with an hour face-to-face lab session, which is Lab 1. And we will do this lifting and moving stuff several different times in labs. It's key for your safety, and many of these things are really best taught in a face-to-face lab session, but it's very important that you have prepared for that lab so that it can go efficiently and you can get lots of reps without us having to stop and do a bunch of direct instruction. So your resource document that goes along with your assignment helps guide you through the hour of independent prep that you'll need to do for this lesson. The content of this lesson has some information about personal protective equipment, PPE, as well as a few comments on wellness, including immunizations. And then we talk mostly about scene safety and how you can assess to see if the scene is safe, or at least safe enough to enter for now. And we'll make the point that scene safety is an ongoing concern, something that you assess over and over and over. And then we're also going to work on how to lift and move patients safely. A fair number of injuries to EMS and fire personnel occurs as part of the lifting and moving process. So, to talk about PPE, we want to make the point that personal protective equipment and body substance isolation is based on the concept that if you can maintain distance and limit your contact with a patient who has body substances that are leaking from them, spewing from them, spraying from them, then that's your best plan. Gloves are always a good idea. And then you need to worry about body substances splashing on you, spraying into your eyes or nose or mouth. And so long sleeves are a key part of our PPE ensemble. And while in the summer this is harder for you to have because you don't naturally have long sleeves on, you'll need to have a plan for how to deal with that, whether that be your bunker coat, your wildland coat, or you have some sort of long sleeve garment with you that you put on as you're on the way to the call or as soon as you get to the call. But keeping your arms covered is important because you're never sure if you have totally intact skin. While it is true that body substances splashing on intact skin is not an exposure, we still would prefer to keep body substances off our skin, and I don't think at any given time you're totally sure if you have intact skin on your hands and on your arms. Then the mask and goggles and eye protection aren't necessarily needed on every single call. We don't walk into a call for a guy having chest pain sitting in a recliner in his house wearing a mask and goggles and everything else. But the mask and goggles or mask and eye protection are to keep you from having an exposure to your nose, your eyes, your mouth. And that PPE should be immediately available to you should you need it on that particular call. It's fairly standard practice for people to wear gloves as they get out of the truck, they get out of their vehicle. As they approach the patient, they're already gloved up and they're already wearing long sleeves. But when you get into that situation where you have spraying, where you have airborne contaminants, then you're going to need to add something for your face and eyes. Any discussion of safety and well-being includes some general discussion on wellness. And there's some stuff in your resource document as well as in your textbook. And the bullet points there are try to get rest, try to be well rested, get good sleep. The number of hours that you sleep may not be the big deal. It's how well you sleep. Need to stay hydrated. We're all probably a little bit dehydrated to start with on most days of the year and then certainly in the warmer months. And so hydration is critical, as is proper nutrition, as is a general fitness level. It's well documented that the more generally fit an EMS responder or firefighter is, the less likely they are to be injured. So there's good stuff in your book to read on this. I think probably that's the best source for this. The chapter on well-being has good information there. and we're not minimizing that at all. Simply don't have a lot that I need to say that you can't read and assess on your own. Immunizations required for most jobs, required for you for clinicals for the EMT program. And this is a list of standard immunizations, the MMR and varicella, as well as annual tuberculosis tests, the PPD test, annual flu shots. And there's tons of debate about that, and I'm one of those people that's a little skeptical, but the science doesn't back up my skepticism. The science says that the flu shot is clearly the way you should go, or at least influenza immunization, whether it be the nasal spray or the shot. And so while you may have your own opinion on that, there's no science to back up any position other than immunization against influenza makes sense. It is required in order to do clinicals at our clinical sites, and clinicals are required in order to complete our program. And so therefore, it doesn't matter what you think, this is where we are, and we need to have up-to-date annual PPD tests and influenza vaccinations. Hepatitis, whether it's A, B, or C, is a big deal and a big risk for us, and the hepatitis B 3-shot series is standard in fire and EMS. And then maintaining your tetanus status, your tetanus immunization status. And then once in your lifetime, you need to have a Tdap, which is tetanus, diphtheria, and pertussis. Pertussis is whooping cough. And so a tetanus and Tdap is part of the immunization list as well. As you get further into the EMT course, we will introduce the process for tracking your immunizations and receiving authorization to do clinicals. But just realize that this is good for you, for general wellness and your safety and well-being, as well as a requirement for the program. Scene safety is something that we will talk about every time that we're with you in every lab and on every simulated call that we go on. Scene safety is paramount to us, and we are going to emphasize it heavily. And we're going to emphasize it continuously through a simulated call, not just when you walk in the door. To walk in the door and say, I have my gloves on and the scene is safe, is not sufficient. A scene safety assessment is an ongoing assessment. Situational awareness ties right into that. We will work with you to practice being able to be aware of what's going on around you, not just what you're focused on. We'll talk about a ton of different scene hazards. If it's a motor vehicle crash on the interstate, clearly you have traffic. Clearly you have sharp objects. Clearly you have potential slick conditions for your footing. But there's multiple other scene hazards. People with weapons that are available to people. There's all kinds of issues there in terms of scene hazards. Your safety assessment begins early. It begins probably before a dispatch. It certainly takes a big step up at the dispatch. You're listening for the location and you're beginning to assess the scene for safety levels early on. And we believe it is the first step. And the step mnemonic is something unique to us. It's not available in stores. It's only available here. And we just flat out made it up. But here's what it stands for. We believe that you should put up your shields first. That's the S. Put up your shields before you even know if there are threats. An example would be gloves. An example would be immediate access to face protection, long sleeves, that sort of thing. So PPE as a first step, and several other shields can be put in place. And we'll talk about that as we work through the course and in the lab setting. The second thing, so you have shields, and then you have threats. The T stands for threats. So again, we're going to put shields on or use shielding as a concept prior to identifying all the threats that are present. But head on a swivel, ongoing safety assessment, situational awareness helps you identify threats. You need to maintain an escape route. Be sure that wherever you went, you can get your way back out. Maybe you turn around and go the way you came in, maybe you go a different way, but you need to have escape routes in place. And then the P is for partners. All the members of your team, and in cases where there's multiple agencies involved, members of everybody who's on that scene becomes your partners in this context. So that first step is for scene safety, and we make a big deal of that. And then safe lifting and moving, because really a lot of our injuries occur in that scenario. Fortunately, we don't have many injuries due to traffic or many injuries due to weapons and violence and such. But we do have injuries from lifting, and we lift almost all of our patients, whether it's a very simple scene or a complex and dynamic rescue scene. So proper lifting technique is incredibly important. There's stuff on your assignment and resource document about that, so it's well covered in your textbook. And it's not just a matter of your lifting technique in terms of where you put your feet and whether your back is arched or this or that. It's also communicating with those that are working with you. Everyone needs to lift at the same time in a coordinated way. We want to have the right tools. We want to be able to use backboards and scoop stretchers and soft stretchers and stair chairs and ambulance carts. We also need the right amount of help. And so we need to work with you to figure out ways to emergently move a patient when you're by yourself, as well as how to work with a group of another 2 or 3 folks to do a good safe lift. Sometimes you can have too much help. Sometimes you can have not enough help. And we want to help you work through that in this first lab. Again, tools and techniques will teach you the log roll. A 2-person carry will teach you to use a soft stretcher, a scoop stretcher, a spine board, the ambulance cart, the stair chair. And so we want you to prepare for Lab 1 by reviewing some information about those devices and their use. And that is included in your resource document, and there are questions on your assignment to work on. So many of these video presentations will be in this 15 to 20 minute range, and that's just part of the hour or more that you will need to spend in preparation. But it gives you an idea of kind of what we're looking at and what we're talking about. And so that's kind of how this is going to go. And this is the end of the first presentation.